Okay, Dennis, we're in 10 seconds away. You should start.
Everybody's using their own set of facts now. Come on, baby, spread disinformation, chaos and confusion, fan out to the max now. Come on, baby, spread disinformation. InfoWars and Breitbart are making a splash. You wonder how much garbage they will say just for cash. Well, come on, spread disinformation with me. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a very special edition of the Theater of Public Policy. And now, coming to you very, very live from a very, very completely empty and totally disinfected Bryant Lake Bowl Theater, your host for the evening, Tane Danger.
Yay! Hooray! This is me. Hi, everybody. I am super excited to be with you here. My name is Tane Danger, and yes, I'm gonna take this off. So I am here at the Bryant Lake Bowl. It's true. It's very exciting. And I know what you're saying, like, oh wait, how is this possible? You shouldn't be at the Bryant Lake Bowl. We have this order and things. And so this is a true story. So I was part of a thing to make a petition to say that it's very important that we are all staying at home and keeping our social distance from each other. And at the same time, we want to be able to spotlight and highlight a lot of the businesses that are having a hard time right now and struggling. And so if there is a way that we can use our art and our theater to highlight our friends and our longtime supporters at the Bryant Lake Bowl and do it in a way that is entirely safe and secure, we would really like to do that. And so I made this petition to the state of Minnesota. And I mean, as surprising as it is to anybody, they actually said that that's okay. And I have an email that says that I am allowed to be here as long as I am all alone, with the exception of my fabulous tech person, Brian, who is more than 6 feet away from me at all times. And to underscore how seriously they take this, Brian at home sewed these masks that he's handed out to everyone, or everyone, me, and himself, for us to have, and he's letting me keep this. I do not know how he did this, but he made sure that it matched my bow tie for this evening, which is very good. So, you know, I do think that face masks, you should wear them, and you should make sure that they match your bow tie. So I have to say here at the beginning, my name is Tane Danger. I'm the host of the Theater of Public Policy. We are so excited to be with you for this very special Zoom, all socially distant improv show. I am here at this very empty Bryant Lake Bowl, in part because this is our home, this is the theater's home, and because we want you to be supporting them while they are not able to be open. So, if you are watching this right now, you can go to the Bryant Lake Bowl website right now, where they have some fabulous merch that you can buy. Like, there's these lovely hoodies, which are very comfortable right now, and they're a good color, really, for any season, but I was going to say spring, because that's coming. Or you can just make a donation so that they can still be around when we are done with this whole thing. I am so excited for tonight's show. What are we going to do? On the Theater of Public Policy, we talk to some very smart people about a big issue or idea, and then we have this team of fabulous improvisers who takes everything that they have talked about and they bring it to life through entirely unscripted improv comedy theater. This is a very different kind of show because we are all practicing lots of social distancing. So all of our cast and our guests tonight are all using Zoom to live call in to this show. So they are all individually in their own homes. And then we are able to live broadcast this to you. So it's a little different than our other shows. It's very fun. And I think that this is going to be a particularly good one because we are talking about a big topic, disinformation. Which obviously is in the news a lot right now and was in the news a lot before that. So it's a very good conversation. Before we jump in and I introduce our cast and our guests, I do want to make two other quick thank yous, which is one, you'll notice me drinking this lovely beer throughout the show, which is a delicious Finnegan's beer, another one of our fabulous sponsors who all season signed up to help us and support us. I love Finnegan's. They are doing both. Obviously, you can buy their beer in stores, but they have curbside pickup at their Minneapolis brewery where you can go and pick up a growler of Finnegan's. And here's a really fun thing. If you go and you say that you are going and buying beer because you saw this on the Theater of Public Policy or T2P2, they will give you 10% off of your curbside pickup for this. So this is really good. They're obviously having a hard time because they have to have their whole tap room shut down. So go buy some Finnegan's beer tomorrow. They're open 3 to 6 in their Minneapolis tap room. Tell them T2P2 sent you and you get a bit of a discount. And then all throughout the show, MinPost is our big media sponsor who is helping us make sure everybody knows about the shows while doing some very good reporting as well. And so we want to thank them as well. Okay. So, thank you all so much for being here. I am going to take a step back because I want to have the cast of the Theater of Public Policy introduce themselves before we introduce our fabulous guests. So, I'm going to just take a moment and here's the cast for tonight's Theater of Public Policy. Do you each want to say your names?
Duck Washington.
Brandon Boat.
Aaron Roberts.
Jim Robinson.
Dennis Curley.
All right. That's fantastic. Thank you all so much. We're going to see more from them in just a minute. But now I get the tremendous pleasure of introducing our two fabulous guests for this evening. As I said, we're talking all about disinformation this evening. So our guests are first up on my left. I think it's on your left as well. She's senior reporter for Minnesota Public Radio and is a big part of a new effort that organization has put together in combating disinformation. Big round of applause wherever you are watching for Catharine Richert, everybody. Yay! And then just below me is, I think for everyone now below me, she is a senior science writer for the website FiveThirtyEight. She has been on our show many times before, and she's one of our good friends. Please, a big round of applause. Maggie Koerth Baker! Everybody, yay, Maggie, yay! Thank you so much for being here, Maggie. So excited to have you. Let me just start with this sort of general question. We're talking about disinformation. How do we define disinformation? Like, what is it that we're even talking about?
Well, I'll go first because we actually had a extensive discussion at NPR about how we were going to define disinformation when we launched this project in January. We define disinformation as the deliberate spread of false information and also the strategic spread of disinformation. So I'm talking about kind of what we saw in 2016, where you had falsehoods spread on social media to sway public opinion in a specific direction. We also talk a lot about misinformation too, and I think of that more as something that you might see shared on social media, maybe from a relative who isn't really following politics closely, shares something that may or may not be true, takes a sensational headline out of context, shares that, obviously both contributing to a significant problem, but slightly different.
So that is a great sort of start from, because a journalism standpoint. And Maggie, I'm curious because you've looked at this both obviously as a journalist, but then really digging into sort of the science of this. Is that sort of the same way you think about it from a scientific standpoint, the way scientists talk about where disinformation or conspiracy theories come from or how they're defined?
Well, so I think the conspiracy theory definition thing is interesting because it's changed a lot over time. So dating back to like the 1950s, there's this famous book basically called The Paranoid Style in American Politics. And for a really long time, we sort of came out of that thinking that conspiracy theories were something that happened to other people, that they were like this kind of weird thing that popped out of diseased minds. And you had to find these specific diseased people and figure out like, what the heck's wrong with that guy? And then by figuring out what was wrong with that guy, you could then figure out how to stop him from having conspiracy theories. And what has changed in more recent time with science is that we're figuring out that that's not really how conspiracy theories work. Like they'll do these studies where the more conspiracy theories they offer to people in a survey, the more likely it is that somebody has one that they believe in. So probably you believe in one, Tane. I believe in one, I'm sure. Everybody probably has at least one conspiracy theory they believe in, and it's not really about there being something wrong with like these specific people. It's more about what makes it hard for us to see when we're wrong, or update our information, or not fall into finding patterns where patterns don't exist.
So this seems like Catherine, do you all kind of, from a journalism standpoint, buy into that same notion that like there's elements of almost any of these that probably everybody has either believed in at some point or believes now, maybe?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some truth to that. And I think I see that because there's such a wide range of disinformation we see. It could be disinformation about vaccines. It's disinformation about specific candidates. It doesn't really matter. And I think that people tend to believe things that they want to believe. There's a term for this, confirmation bias, right? We believe things that confirm what we already believe or what our culture has taught us to be true. And as a journalist who's trying to fight some of this stuff, or at least equip our audience to be able to sort fact from fiction this election season, we constantly run into that, because no matter how hard we work, there's still going to be things that we can't really show people, the real facts behind, or help people understand that what they might believe isn't necessarily entirely true. That's hard. We continue to do it.
So one other piece of this, and you were starting to get into this, but it does seem like that there is a distinction between malicious disinformation and sort of, I don't know, sometimes I honestly think it's benevolent misinformation. Like there was a meme going around on Twitter a week or two ago that was supposedly a letter that F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote while he was in quarantine in 1918 about...
I have never felt so connected to F. Scott Fitzgerald in my life.
Right. And like all of the like alcohol that he and Zelda were stockpiling to get through this quarantine. And then somebody was like, well, that's false. That wasn't a real thing. That's just made up. And I was like, well, why? Don't tell me that. It doesn't help me to know that that's not true, really. I was very happy thinking that I had this connection with F. Scott Fitzgerald and just wanting more gin. So is that, but I mean, for the work that you all do you think a distinction between this is actually trying to hurt people, or is it just sort of like, you know what, if it's misinformation, it's bad because it's just going to confuse people?
I think there's a lot of it that's bad, even whether you meant it to be bad or not. But I think that for what I have been looking at, when you look at like the research around sort of how to communicate, how to correct people's wrong ideas, a lot of that starts to become complicated when people aren't being malicious about it. And a lot of times people aren't malicious about it, even when it's patently false information. I think another really good example of this actually is the chloroquine thing with the malaria drugs. I'm saying that wrong, I think, off the top of my head right now. Chloroquine, that's it. That is kind of started getting circulated around as a possible treatment for coronavirus. And that had its origins in a study in France that this doctor was trying to see if they could make this thing work for people. But it's sort of become this meme under its own power that is wildly misleading, but it kind of has its basis in something that was meant to be helpful. I think we've seen a lot of those things around coronavirus. Also with like some of the like audio memes that were going around where they were telling you that like you could get rid of coronavirus by drinking salt water off like 20 times a day or something. And like things like that were meant to give people some kind of hope, that were meant to give people some kind of information, fill in these gaps where we don't know what's going on. But they weren't necessarily hurting anyone, but also weren't helping anybody either, and maybe giving people a false sense of safety.
Catherine, is that sort of the same bent you all take?
Yeah, and I think from our perspective with this project specifically, we are looking for disinformation that is malicious in the sense that it's being used to attack a specific candidate or a specific party, and also disinformation that is really meant to sway public opinion in a certain way. I see a lot of memes out there that are like funny, not entirely accurate, but funny. And I think most people know that they're not real. Like, you know, there was one recently, because all we talk about is coronavirus, but it was like, you know, the stages of coronavirus, various pictures of Britney Spears, you know, in her, you know, like continuum as a musician, where she kind of has a mental breakdown. And so it's like not very nice. It's definitely not accurate, but I think everyone knows that that's not true. That is not something that we would necessarily fact check. So we've actually been pretty specific and intentional in what we've chosen to sort of pull out for story ideas, because we feel like it has to sort of fit this theme of trying to get people to vote a certain way or support public policy in a very specific way, if that makes sense.
That does. So let me ask this is one of the things I was very interested in asking you two about. So I'll start with Maggie. Is it true, like this thing that I feel like I've been told, that somebody believes a conspiracy theory and then no matter, the more you argue with them, the more they're going to believe it? Is there stuff that backs that idea up?
So this is actually kind of funny. There is some stuff that backs that idea up. It's also not been replicated, as the research hasn't been repeated as accurately as we would hope. So I think it's a thing I try not to lean too heavily on. You know, we don't know for certain whether that's true right now. But we do know that it's really, really hard to change people's minds, because your decisions, your ideas about this stuff, they aren't all based on fact. So when you go in and you try to counter them with fact, that doesn't really actually work, because those ideas are based on emotion. They're based on past experience. They're based on, you know, feelings of solidarity with the group. And also, like, when you're talking about conspiracy theories, they're based on historical data. You know, I mean, part of the problem with dealing with conspiracy is that there actually have been some conspiracies. You know, you can't act like people are pulling this out of thin air when you can all go back and look at things like the Iran-Contra affair, Teapot Dome scandal. You know, there's just like all of these things.
Can I just say, anytime anybody on the show brings up Teapot Dome, that's a drink moment. That's great. So if that's true, and then I'll kind of bounce it back to Catherine, like, what do you do about that? Because it seems like, you know, okay, people don't want, it's hard to argue just facts with somebody who really believes this conspiracy thing. You're a journalist. You're in a newsroom, so your job is facts.
I know.
So what do you do?
Let me just back up a little bit and talk a little bit about my career. So many moons ago, I used to work for a website called PolitiFact. This was like 2009, 2010. And PolitiFact was one of those first websites where they were fact-checking political claims made by politicians. And at the time, it was totally revolutionary. They won a Pulitzer Prize for it, and it was a great organization to work for. And I think I believe in their mission. I really do. I think what I have learned since then. So I did that, and then I went to NPR and did effectively the same thing for almost 5 years. And we were just fact checking things that people said. And often what we would find is that there was always a grain of truth to what someone was saying, or there was something about it that was accurate, but then it was misleading. And so we were always sort of talking in circles about, well, here are the facts, here's what you need to know, and we give it this rating. When we decided to do what we're doing this year, which is a project that extended from the political fact checking that we used to do, I was the first one who said, guys, we're not going to fact check political claims anymore. This is not a good use of our resources. I don't think it's helpful for people to just get a laundry list of links to where they can find information in government resources or, you know, whatever website. And because I think that it doesn't really turn the needle. Instead, I think we need to be helping our audience understand how they can actually look at information and figure out whether it's true or not, provide them with resources, but also do a lot of good reporting around how people are navigating this. So we've done features about census disinformation and how one community in Minnesota has been really laying the groundwork to fight census disinformation. We have been looking at stories around the motivations behind spreading disinformation. So we've taken a much broader approach, and I think that that's been helpful because I think we've decided we might not necessarily change everyone's minds, but at least we can give them the tools to be able to understand it better, if that makes sense.
I agree with that completely. So around the same time that you were working for PolitiFact, I was doing a lot of science blogging that was really leaning on like debunking stuff. So you'd go and you'd find somebody saying something stupid on the internet about science, and then you'd tell them how they were wrong. And it's very funny. It's great fun to make fun of other people. But what science found is that doesn't work to change anyone's mind. You're just preaching to the choir. You're not actually doing something useful. And I think one of the things that particularly stood out to me about this was the vaccine controversies. So a few years ago, I did a fellowship at Harvard where I was taking some classes in history of science. And one of the papers that I wrote, I got to go back and look at 40 years of the New York Times coverage of vaccine controversies, basically. And what you sort of saw over and over in this coverage is experts coming in and saying, here's why these people believe this. They don't trust science. They just won't believe what we have to say. They are against expertise. They haven't seen the dangers of this. And then you'd have the interview with the person who didn't want their kid to have a vaccine. And that wasn't what they were saying. What they were saying about themselves was different. What they were saying about themselves was an argument about political power and the reach of government and how they should be relating to, people who tell them they have to do a thing medically, which is a really important distinction, I think. And like, if you keep saying what you think people believe and you don't engage with what they actually believe, you're not really actually doing a service, and you're probably going to convince them more than they already were that you are a bad guy. And we know from this research that like once they think you're a bad guy, you're screwed.
Right. And I've asked this question every time I interview someone who studies this stuff. I'm always like, well, how do you talk to your family about things they may believe that aren't true? And the same thing I hear, and Maggie, you would know better than I whether this has actually been proven to work or not. The same thing I hear over and over again is have a conversation with them. If they post something on Facebook that's false, don't demean them in the comment section. Reach out to them personally and say, hey, I have additional resources, or I don't believe that to be true. Can we have a conversation about it? That seems to apparently work a little bit better than making someone feel bad about themselves, right?
It's crazy. It's almost like junior high girls aren't really good at interpersonal relationships.
I mean, I love this because it sounds to me like part of what you're saying is that before you can start to debunk a conspiracy theory or change someone's mind about something that may not be true, so you have to listen to them first, and you have to sort of hear where they're at.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Catherine, like, though, that's easy to say, and it's also maybe something that you can say to someone on an interpersonal, like, okay, when your aunt or your, brother-in-law posts something weird on Facebook, reach out to them. But again, like, you're in a newsroom, and you're not going to, I don't know, it seems like your role is different because you're not going to be able to go out and sort of say to every single person who's listening to public radio, like, okay, tell me exactly why you think that the moon landing didn't happen, and let's talk about what you believe before I show you the Neil Armstrong tape.
Yeah, and that's not really our role. I mean, I don't think that we see ourselves in that role. That said, another really important component to what we're doing this year, and I hate to keep going back to this, but this is just sort of my frame of reference, is that we are doing a lot of audience engagement. So it's not just, here's information, use it. It's tell us what you're seeing, and then let's work on it together, right? So we have a lot of audience engagement around asking people to tell us what we're seeing in case we miss something that would be newsworthy, and then working with them either behind the scenes and sometimes in stories to kind of figure out, well, how did you figure out whether this is true or not? How did you navigate this situation? We're also trying to do a lot of community outreach in person. Hopefully, a few events have actually been postponed for now, but around this topic as well. So, I don't think we're having interpersonal conversations with people, but we are trying to make it personal, if that makes sense.
I have a million more questions for you all, but I also want to eventually, we're going to open this up for people who are watching to get to ask you all questions. Before we do any of that, though, we should give our improvisers a chance to unpack and reimagine some of the amazing things that you've already said. So this is the part of the show where we're going to turn the stage over to our cast of fabulous improvisers. So thank you so much, both Maggie and Catherine. The two of them and I are going to turn our cameras off and then turn it over just to the Theater of Public Policy. So while the cast is getting ready, I'll just say the second half of the show, we're going to open it up for you all who have questions. I know there are a lot of people watching on Facebook right now. There are people watching on YouTube now that we got that up and running. If you have a question, please put it in the comments for Facebook Live or tweet it at Theater of Public Policy or even at me, and I will ask it of our guests in the second half of the show. But for right now, what we're going to do is I'm going to turn the stage over to the cast of the Theater of Public Policy. Everything they do is entirely made up on the spot, all improvised based on just what we heard, and it's all via Zoom because they're all in different places. So this is weird and different and wonderful. And so please, wherever you are, make a big round of applause for the Theater of Public Policy.
Hey there, cats and kittens. This is a real fur cat hat, and I'm a bad guy.
A real fur cat hat?
That's correct.
You know, I've read about you people that you actually raise cats to make hats out of.
That is correct. It's a great business model, and it's American.
I don't feel comfortable with that. I'd like to know more about you so that I can understand why you're killing cats to make hats.
I didn't say I was killing them. They may just die. You know, people, cats, animals, everybody dies at some point. Am I right?
You're right about that part of it. Wait a minute. Those must be legitimate hats then, because cats do die and you don't see them around. They've become hats.
You got it.
It's incredible. Thank you. Yeah. You know, my shoes, believe this or not, are made out of armadillos. That when was the last time you saw a live armadillo? I don't.
You kill armadillos?
Just with my car.
Well, I hear that you hurt yourself, son.
I did. I don't want to go to the doctor, though. A doctor's where people go to get sick.
No, that's all right. I understand that you don't want to go to the doctor, and I understand that you don't want to show that your face was deformed and disfigured. But we got to take care of this. We can't have you going around injured. But I don't want you to worry. I have a remedy, all right? This is my home remedy of Windex, all right? You just spray a little Windex on, it makes everything all better. My family's been doing it for decades. All right, so just lean in, and we'll just spritz a little bit of that, just like there. That's right. Does it feel any better? Does your face feel like it's coming around?
It does feel a little bit better, but there's now a burning sensation that wasn't there before.
That means that it's working.
Does it?
Yeah.
So you better spray more.
Okay, here we go.
No, it's just getting hotter. You know what?
We'll get double time.
I'm sorry. I'm going to have to put on a second mask.
Oh, no. I can't believe that the Windex didn't work. The Windex always works.
Not this time. I'm sorry. Usually I trust things that are put on the internet, but, I can't trust your family tale either.
No. Look, my family, sure, I've seen it firsthand. Like little Samuel, he tripped down and broke his leg. It broke, like you could see his leg came completely off. And we spritzed a little bit of this on there, and his leg grew right back, right before our eyes. Honest to goodness.
Well, I'm not going to call you a liar, not to your face.
Wait, you would call me a liar not to my face?
Well, yeah. Everybody does.
What do you mean everybody does?
you're just kind of hanging out at the bus stop all day saying, "What ails you, friend? I've got a family remedy. Come and ride up." And then you just spray that fluid on them.
Look, I learned that Windex can bring people joy in their lives. Am I not supposed to spread that around to people?
I mean, you're literally spreading it on people.
I bet if you took those 2 masks off, you'd see that you were beautiful now. An Adonis.
I'll tell you what, I'll take off the 1 mask.
Look, that doesn't show us anything. That looks exactly like you did when you came here with a mask. Show us the other one. Those pretty face. I want to see that. I want to see that model-esque nose and that Greek chin. Show me.
All right. Get ready.
I'm ready. Here, have some more Windex.
So I'm a scientist and I need facts.
Okay, I'm a dolphin who was living in the canals in Venice.
Oh, so I speak a little dolphin.
You should know that dolphins mate for life, and what you just said to me puts me in a really awkward position.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did
It's
anyone else hear it? Do we need to? I'm a great therapist. If you.
Everybody else heard it because it went through the water as sonar. So you've essentially humiliated me, and now I'm going to have to leave Venice. I don't know where I'm going to go.
No, we were so happy to have you back finally. Please don't go.
I got to tell you this. I'll tell you this now. I've never really been to Venice before this. I just got all these memes, and I thought people are going to be so unhappy. I've got to do something good. And people were talking about how we were back in the canals, and that just simply wasn't true. So I swam all the way from Tunisia, which apparently they have dolphins there. Who knew? And I ended up in Venice. And then, now that you've said this, my spouse is probably going to leave me for a porpoise.
For a porpoise?
I know, anything can happen now.
Oh my God.
Thank you, science. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, well.
Wow, is it really you?
Yes, I walked on the moon. It really happened. And
oh man, Neil Armstrong.
I brought back this moon cape.
It's Neil Armstrong.
Neil Armstrong. Hey, Neil, what was it like working with Stanley Kubrick?
That's a nice try. I've
I
heard that
know,
one
I
before.
think he's great. And I think that
his
moon landing
autograph
was really
at
impressive.
Comic-Con. Can you sign the same one?
Sure, I'd love to sign that. Let's just get this pen right there. All right. No, I didn't work with Kubrick. Everybody's always asking about him. I worked with Buzz and the other guy.
Lightyear?
Was the other guy Coppola?
No. There you go again, naming another director.
I'm the other guy. I got to go around the moon, but I never got off. I don't like you.
I'm sorry, other guy. I wish I could have remembered your name.
You really made him mad, I think.
Say, you guys want to hear about what Kubrick was like?
Yeah! Tell us about
he was
Kubrick.
Great. Always having those eyes wide shut parties. Wild times.
Wow! I don't need to explain that any further. I know all about that.
I was part of it, and I don't want to think about it.
Wow! So Neil, it's been so many years. When are you going to make a new movie?
Well, they're just not making them like they used to. You go to the moon, you impress people. Now people want bigger. If you go to Mars, heck, that'll kill you nowadays.
But Neil, you could do a Hulu original.
Yeah.
You could stream it.
I'd like to, but it's time for the next generation. One of you could go.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't know.
You.
I get kind of bashful in front of the cameras, you know, like I mean, going out into space, I could totally do that, but like sitting on a movie set with everybody looking on me, that would be
With
really
that
cool.
flag that you put into the ground, right?
This one.
That flag, that one.
I had to go back and get it.
I think we could maybe do it. I
Yeah?
have faith in us, don't you?
I think we could. I think we could absolutely do it. Absolutely, sure. Why not?
Why not? I mean,
Why not?
things are changing. The world is different. We might as well take a risk. Take one step for us and one step. Oh,
The other guy.
I was there, and it was Tarantino.
Oh, never mind then.
Look.
That's fun. Okay, that was great. That's good stuff. All right, hey, a big round of applause, everybody, for the Theater of Public Policy. Yay! Oh, that's fun. So, my name, for folks who are just tuning in now, bizarrely, is Tane Danger. I am here live at the Bryant Lake Bowl Theater, and I have two amazing guests with me, Catharine Richert and Maggie Koerth. We are so excited. We're talking about disinformation and conspiracy theories and fake news and all this good stuff. I'm going to take this quick moment to say that if you are watching and you are enjoying this show, there is a way to support this by giving a donation on our GiveMN page, or even better, becoming a Patreon supporter of the Theater of Public Policy. So if you just think about, normally we would do this show and you would buy a ticket for like $12 or $15. We would love so much, it would help us so much if you would make a donation right now to help us support this. Just so you know, we are paying our cast still. This is still how many of our artists like make their living. And while right now is hard, we're still trying to do this kind of work and we love it. And so we're just asking if you can, now would be amazing and wonderful time for you to support us. So, make a donation, go to our GiveMN page. There's a link right there that we're putting up. So, in the meantime, we have lots of questions for Maggie and Catharine, which I'm excited to get to. If you have questions, it's not too late. Please put them on the Facebook live stream or send them to us on Twitter. So this is a really good question, and I don't know who asked it. It just got sent in to me. But the question is about this, like, okay, so we're supposed to empathize and try and meet someone who has a belief that is untrue. And the question is, how do you empathize with someone's truth when it's not true?
Well, you don't empathize necessarily with the thing that's not true. You find the thing that is true that led them to the untruth. That's coming from, sort of what people have done, sort of trying to understand how to change people's minds. You want to be part of a group that they identify with, somebody that they feel connected to. So not everybody's going to be able to communicate with everybody all of the time. You also want to have things that you share so that you're kind of having these feelings of camaraderie and these feelings of trust. Because, as much as we want science to be about absolute facts and rationality and logic and like Mr. Spock crap, that's not really actually how humans work. And so you kind of have to go with that.
I would just say everything that Maggie said. I think really just understanding where someone is coming from to try to understand how they ended up where they are is probably the most important thing, because what you're really doing is laying the groundwork for trust, right? So what I tell my family members as I'm telling them about this project is like, we're not necessarily trying to convince someone to have a completely different belief than they had 20 minutes ago. What we are trying to do is to help them just understand, like think about the world a little bit more broadly, that there might be things out there they haven't necessarily evaluated or thought about before. And this is an opportunity to do that. Easier said than done, I would say.
I mean, I always try and push this on or ask people this, which I think is going to what you're talking about. Is like, it's easy to be, as you said in the first part, Maggie, like the person who says, oh, this thing that you believe is totally stupid and wrong. When was the last time you yourself, like, reflected on something that you really deeply believed and said, oh, that's wrong. Like, I was wrong about that thing, and I completely like shift on that. And people, like, it's hard for a lot of people to find a time that they did that.
I don't have that problem, Tane.
That's good. You're a great scientist. You're brilliant. So, okay. I wanted to ask a question, which is this worse now than it used to be? Is believing in conspiracy theories, disinformation, is this something that is worse now, as a lot of people seem to think, or is it just that we're more aware of it now?
So I actually have an answer for this. And I've been hoping you would ask this question because it's a really interesting study that Joseph Kaczynski at the University of Miami did, where he went through 100,000 of these letters to the editor that have been published in the New York Times and the Chicago Tribune over the course of like 120 years, right? And so he had these grad students going through these letters to the editor and coding them for conspiracies. And what they sort of found was that, you know, over time, we still, the number of conspiracy theories did not change particularly. You know, this is one of the best measurements we have of Americans' interest in conspiracy theory over many, many years. And it's not all that different now than it was in the past. And there was some really crazy stuff that they were publishing too. I mean, like, my favorite examples of this was like the CIA created lesbianism, Jimmy Carter is a communist agent, secret baby farms where they're growing organs for people, you know, like all of this stuff. It's not new.
Yeah, I think, at least in my like very limited, 10 years covering disinformation and political fact checking, the thing that I see that's different is I think it's always been around for sure. I think it's louder than it used to be. And what I mean by that is that it's there's more of a platform for it. I also think that as our nation has become more divided, the opportunity for this stuff has it's like this vicious cycle. The more divided we become, the easier it is to spread this stuff. I don't feel like that was the case 10 years ago when I was doing fact checks for PolitiFact. The other thing that has changed is that the internet has increasingly become a place where people go to get their information. That was happening, and when I say internet, what I really mean is social media. That was happening back in 08, 09 when I was still a reporter in Washington, D.C. It is very much so the reality that we're battling against as journalists now, is people go to Facebook to like see people's kids, but they're also going there to get serious news, right? So it's like this mind switch you have to do. And I think that's actually part of the problem, right? Like we were sort of trained to see social media as a way to entertain ourselves, when in fact it's become a major source of information. So our mind isn't necessarily prepped to absorb both of those things equally. And that might be actually one reason why we are more prone to share disinformation, because we're just not really thinking deeply about it in the moment that we're viewing it.
Yeah.
I have a question for each of you, and Maggie, I'll start with you, which is you cover science, and it does seem like you're like, when people talk about science, I appreciate this very much as somebody who sort of defines himself as like an artist, that people are like, well, science, your job is as a scientist to come up with answers for me about things. Like, you should know what is the true answer about something. And I think that we're seeing a lot of this in terms of, coronavirus things, but this is true very generally. And I think that what we know probably is that that's not necessarily how science works. Science doesn't always find like the answer. Science at best sort of rules out some other things. But if that's true, like people have this misinterpretation of like what science is supposed to do for them. And so then if it's not doing that, they start to fill in the blanks. And maybe that's where some of this comes from.
Well, I mean, I think it's kind of the difference between like, I guess, like changing your oil and trying to figure out why your engine is making a weird sound. So I think we think of science a lot of times in the frame of like, there will be a very simple process. We'll do an experiment. We'll find the answer. We'll fix it. Problem solved. And it's actually usually way more complicated than that. It's really rare for us to just get a fact, pulled out of the air. I think a really good example of this right now is the whole face mask thing. I just ran a story about that today that was kind of pointing out that this is less a question of, should you wear a face mask or not, because we don't actually have the data to answer that definitively. It ends up coming down to sort of your personal interpretation, which obviously, Tane.
Yes. Wait, what were you saying? It doesn't matter?
It does matter that it matches your bow tie.
Thank you.
But it doesn't necessarily, we're not really sure whether or not it actually makes you safer. And reasonable scientists can disagree reasonably on it. And that makes a messy space. And one of the scientists I talked to about this told me that, there's lots of these kinds of things that come up with coronavirus, with health science, with science in general. And that one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves is learning to be uncomfortable with uncertainty. And learning to be comfortable with uncertainty. Sorry, we're all already uncomfortable with uncertainty.
More comfortable with uncertainty. And so, yeah. And so we feel like, Catherine, the question I wanted to ask you about this was, I've heard journalists, and I'm not a journalist. I haven't been in this journalism for as long as you have or as long as other people have. But I have heard journalists of an older generation say that something has changed where we more often ask journalists now to speculate on like what may be like the outcome of something, right? Like what could this mean? And that I've heard some journalists really try and resist that and say, that's putting me in this weird place where that's not really my job. And then it potentially leads to some of this kind of stuff, because now I'm trying to like fill in the gaps of things that we don't know. I don't know, but people want answers to, like, well, what does this mean? Like, well, here's one thing it could mean. And then people sort of like spin out from there. Is that a fair, like, maybe we should stop asking journalists to do that? Or I don't know. How do you think about that?
Absolutely. And I would say I'm lucky to work at a place where we don't do that. And I have no problem saying, I don't have the answer to that right now. That's something I need to learn more about. And I'm cool with that. And I know that I'm supported in that sort of answer. I think I see it a lot on, like cable television. I watch MSNBC and Fox and CNN as much as everyone does. And I think that there is a platform and like a need for that kind of instantaneous gratification that Maggie was just talking about. Like we want to know what is going on right now. And so we have people come on whose job is literally to speculate. And these are, political commentators. And it's not like they're making stuff up out of thin air usually, but these are not fully vetted theories about whatever the subject might be. And I feel personally very uncomfortable doing that. So I won't do it. I refuse to. But yes, I see it a lot. And I think it's certainly part of the issue.
Okay, I've got a question which dovetails perfectly with this. Somebody asks, is it human nature to just fill in the blanks?
Yes. One of the fun things about our brains is that they're these amazing pattern finding machines, right? Like that's why we get to, survive and like build whole civilizations and all that kind of fun jazz. But the side effect of that is that we see drunk octopuses trying to fight you in coat hangers. And we see patterns in, the shadows on the moon that we assume have to be coming from a studio set. We find these patterns that aren't really there, but our brain is so primed to look for them that we can't help but see them.
Another question from the audience. This is actually, I don't know how I know this. It says, a question from a 7-year-old. Why is lying bad?
Oh, man.
Because your mommy says so.
Yeah, I should get my 7-year-old in here to talk about it.
It's the parent of a 6-year-old.
Yeah, I think I feel like this is sort of relevant to my life right now because I do have 3 young kids, 2 of which are, starting to understand that lying isn't great and doing it to get out of doing stuff or to, so they don't know that they spilled the milk or whatever. And there is sort of this fine line between like, if we lie about the big stuff, that becomes a problem. If we lie about the little stuff, you know, it just sort of depends on the context.
Well,
And sorry, Tane, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, I mean, yeah, I get this is a question from a young viewer, and there's a young aspect to it. And yet, I do think that there's a part of our brains, or like a part of our, I'll be honest, like political discourse right now, and a lot of our sort of social discourse generally, which is like, well, if you can lie and get away with it, then you're like winning. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying everybody believes that, but I think that there are people who are like, well, if you lie and you get away with it, then that's good. And I think that it is almost a fundamental question: why be honest?
Well, and so let's spin that out a little bit further, right? So it's not just lying and getting away with it, but what if we are heading towards a situation where anyone can say that anything is a lie, right? And we're seeing that a lot, especially in like doctored videos and media. If our brains are trained to think that anything we see caught on camera is accurate, but when it's not, that's not only going to cause us to distrust everything that we see, but then anyone can say, oh, well, it was a doctored photo, it was a doctored video, you know, that's not accurate. I mean, it really kind of starts to mess with your head. And I think that that's where the real danger is, in allowing disinformation to perpetuate and allowing people to lie and get away with it.
I think there's also some stuff that we see in like the patterns of trust in America, like over the last 40 or 50 years. You know, we have basically fallen from these extremely high levels of trust, like not just in the government, but like in each other, down to the point where I think one of the best quotes I got about this was like, I don't really believe it can fall any farther. And that has all sorts of consequences. I mean, that has interplay with the partisanship thing, where people's trust goes up when their party is in power and down when it's not, which has all sorts of, you know, knock-on effects about what you expect the government to be doing. It has an impact on our willingness to work together towards shared political goals, because if you don't trust the other Americans or some Americans, you aren't willing to actually like come together and solve problems. You know, it has all of these impacts, and a lot of it boils down to us just learning not to trust each other.
And so, okay, I have to ask this question, because this is like one of my passion things, which I'm going to preface by saying you're both journalists, and so your job in some ways is to be incredulous, right? Like there's the old line for journalists, like if your mother says she loves you, fact check it. But nonetheless, I'm going to ask this. Should we be more credulous? Like, would it be in some ways better have we gotten too incredulous, where we as news consumers think like everything is like potentially fake or a conspiracy, or somehow the wool is being pulled over on our eyes, and so we're looking too hard for this stuff?
This is hard. This is really hard. I mean, like this kind of gets into some of the same stuff around like, you know, people believe in conspiracy theories because conspiracies have actually happened. It's really hard to blanketly say that. I think that we are blanketly say like you trust too much or you don't trust enough. I think that we are better positioned to teach people how to think through some of these things, and how to think about evidence, and how to think about, maybe we just all need educations in Bayesian statistics. Like Tune
in to our next show where we dive into Bayesian statistics.
It makes great comedy.
I don't know. What do you think about that? I mean, I don't know. I totally get this, and I don't want people to just sort of believe things that are untrue. And yet I also feel like our skin is so hard sometimes that we just sort of, no matter what is out there, we also have maybe a reaction like, well, there must be something behind that. Like it can't.
Yeah. And I think that is the attitude that has like really defined maybe the last 4 years in politics too. This division is sort of rooted in this idea that we simply cannot trust anything out there. It doesn't matter which side of the political coin you fall on. I see it happening with my conservative friends and my liberal friends just as much. And, you know, I'm skeptical because I fear if I let my guard down, I will screw, like I'll screw up my reporting, right? That would be bad. But
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying entirely. I do think we've definitely reached that point, and I think that that's concerning. I did go before coronavirus took over my life. I had the opportunity, and this is a story yet to be done. All the tape is there. I spent the morning with these folks, but it was a group that was meeting before church every day in the basement of this church in Minneapolis. And the topic was disinformation. And I was really intrigued by this because I was like, why are people who are Christian, who are going to church every Sunday, taking an extra hour of their day to talk about disinformation? And the conversation was fascinating because it got at this exact issue. It was, at what point do we learn to live with that discomfort in having differences? At what point do we decide that we're going to trust someone even though we are not in the same orbit whatsoever, and respect their beliefs even though we know them not to be true? And I thought it was fascinating. Someday I'll get to do that story. It's just not going to be before the stay-at-home order.
I really want to read that.
So, yeah, it was a fascinating discussion and really forced me to sort of pause and think about how I approach some of the stuff personally.
So I've got one last question from the audience here, which is just for you all. I know I just said we shouldn't ask journalists to speculate, but what does the future look like with either less or with more misinformation? I mean, how do we sort of prepare ourselves going forward? Is there more critical thinking of the public? Do we go beyond our echo chambers? I guess, how do we go forward is sort of the gist of that question.
So I think I have a few things in mind to answer that question. The thing I have been most surprised about so far this year, I think 4 years ago, we saw something that was like large scale and out of our control and happening in countries that were influencing politics here. And that's a very broad brush way to describe everything, because I don't think that was exclusively true.
And we're talking about sort of electioneering and misinformation there.
Exactly. I think what we have seen so far, at least locally in Minnesota, is that a lot of people who wish to spread disinformation to influence the outcome of public policy, they're taking cues from that and doing it in a much more grassroots sort of local way. And the audience is ripe for that because we're already primed to be distrustful now. I will give you an example. A reporter at NPR wrote a story last week about how the state is going to take on the death certificates, anything that's counted as sort of respiratory failure is going to be counted towards the coronavirus death count. And that is being circulated online now by certain groups that want to believe a certain thing, that this is the way that the local government gets more federal assistance and like inflates the death count to make everyone more scared than they already are. I find that really interesting. We'll probably have a story on that this week, but it's I think until we are able to kind of come together a little bit more and empathize a little bit more with each other, that attitude will continue to exist and be exploited too. And I think that that's where each of us sort of has to make an individual decision about how we're going to not only empathize with people who don't agree with us, but also hold our public officials a little bit more accountable. I think what I don't see enough of is people calling out public officials when they are perpetuating some of these conspiracies. When you're hearing it from the people in power, it makes it very difficult to switch your own mind and to also think outside of your own little bubble in terms of what you believe.
I think that there's also something, I agree with all of that. I think there's also something to be said for the idea that like we have kind of gotten ourselves into a place where politics has become about a game and entertainment. And so you see somebody saying something, but if they're on your team, maybe you feel like they're winning and it doesn't matter to you. And I think there's a book that I'm gonna plug here for a person that I have used as a source multiple times. Etienne Hirsch has a book out right now that's called Politics is for Power. And it's basically about shifting the way that we approach politics in America from being this hobbyist entertainment team sport thing to something that we're actually using in our communities to improve our communities and to create communities. And that, I think, that's an important thing that I think we sort of have to take on, and it has to start locally, because right now, at this point, local trust is much bigger than national trust. And if we lose all of that local trust, I think we're in really bad shape.
That is a fantastic note to end on, and I will second that book recommendation, Politics is for Power. It's a really interesting reframing of how to think about what we do with politics. I want to thank both our guests, Maggie Koerth and Catharine Richert. Thank you so much. But don't leave, because I'm going to turn the stage over to the cast of the Theater of Public Policy one more time. So just like before, they're going to take everything that we've talked about and they're going to bring it to life through entirely unscripted improv comedy. So Catharine, Maggie, and I are all going to turn off our videos so that you all can just enjoy the cast of the Theater of Public Policy for now. So please, wherever you are, make a big round of applause for the Theater of Public Policy.
Brandon, Duck, it gives me great pleasure to be the officiant at your wedding. Things have changed since I became a minister, and part of what I'd like to do now for both Duck and for Brandon is speculate on if this will actually work as a marriage.
What do you mean, speculate?
Well,
I'm committed to this relationship.
I am too.
Let me say this. Just watching you in the course of this ceremony has made me think that I need to fill in some of the blanks. Now, Duck, I noticed at the unity candle that you hesitated. And to me, that seems to indicate that perhaps you don't want to unite with Brandon. I'm just saying, I'm just speculating. But before we actually seal the deal here, I just want to say some of these hunches that I'm having as a minister.
Jay, let me tell you something. There was a bee flying around that unity candle. And I hesitated because I have an allergy.
I saw it.
If I get stung by a bee, this will be a very sad ceremony. It's not because I don't love Brandon.
I would just want to say that the couples who find external reasons for the falling apart of a relationship are really about 60% less likely to endure past 5 years. And again, please enjoy the reception, have fun on the honeymoon, but these are some of the things I'm seeing, and I'm just saying that, what do I know? I'm just a minister who's performed thousands of these ceremonies.
Well, apparently you didn't go to the hour-long disinformation talk at your church this morning.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing.
There was it. Why wasn't I told about this disinformation talk?
Yeah, they told us that this whole thing that we've been reading, it's lies.
At the church?
At the church.
Well,
yeah, they said that dinosaurs are real and that evolution is a thing and that we were going to be together forever.
I now pronounce you man and man.
I'm glad both of you are here. This is so difficult for me to say.
Say it, man, say it.
I've caught you lying in the course of your work, and I feel like we need to have the conversation about how lying is bad.
Whoa. Hold on now. You said you caught us in a lie. What lie did you catch us in?
You guys said that you had brought your lunch, but I saw you go out together after I asked if I could go with you, and you went out and got burgers, and I was not.
No, man, no, man. I have a grill at my desk. I made those burgers at my desk.
Yeah, I don't care what you read on Snopes. We ate lunch. We ate those burgers
at the desk. We didn't go out.
Well, I'm sorry. I mean, I printed it out from Snopes, and that's just simply not the case. There's a whole article.
Sir, let me ask you something, okay? How do you know that Snopes isn't the conspiracy? maybe they're just some behind the scene puppet people who are trying to keep the truth from you.
Right, some puppet people.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I listened to this podcast on NPR. They did this report on how you guys have been lying to me, going out for burgers.
I made the burgers in the office, Rob.
And
It's
haven't
here.
you heard about NPR? NPR be lying all the time.
That's fake news.
NPR, you know, you think it stands for Minnesota Public Radio, but what it really stands for is my paper is wrong with a RW.
I mean, I like burgers too. I don't know why you guys are lying to me.
I don't know why you're whining about burgers, man. Like, if it were about burgers, you should have just said burgers. You wanted to have lunch with us. You didn't say you wanted to have our burgers.
You know what? I bet you this is one of those guys who just thinks that the Teapot Dome was a real thing. The Teapot Dome.
Teapot Dome.
I mean,
Like,
I did
like
hire.
1920s Wyoming and was like, I'm gonna send my petroleum to California.
Teapot Dome.
I did hire this university class. I gave them a grant at Harvard, and they went through and they coded all of your emails. And I went through all the past mentions of burgers,
right.
and when
That's
I'm
a
on there,
breach
and they
of-
found
that's
thousands.
a security breach of security.
Yeah, I mean, come on, did you have, what right do you have to go through my emails? Were they on a public
It's
server?
not
I
about
don't
the
think so.
emails, okay? It's not about the emails.
And then I called your significant others. And they ratted you out.
What do you mean? What do you mean, my significant other? Who did you talk to?
I'm single.
I mean, I called your homes when you weren't there, and I got some answers.
I have
That's
a
all I'm gonna
parrot.
say.
The communists are always sneaking into my house trying to figure out what's going on. I bet they answer the phone.
Yeah, right? They're tapping our phone lines,
They're
right?
always trying to steal our sandwiches.
That's true. You promise?
That's why I
Absolutely.
burgers in the office.
Guys, that's such a relief. I thought you guys were dipping out without me eating these burgers, and my feelings were hurt, but it's the communists in your home. It's not you guys just.
Yeah, it's just
And the parrot. Communists and the parrot. You know, burgers, bro. Next time, we'll dial it in. The three of us, like besties, best friends that ever there was.
That's a relief.
Much
Thank
love.
you. Good. What are you guys doing now? Do you want to get some burgers?
Oh, well, I mean, look at the time.
Let me paint a picture for you.
Oh?
It's Thanksgiving, and I want to see this typical American family look beneath the surface of what they're saying and really go for the empathy that will connect them when they're trying to discuss difficult situations. Let's see what happens.
Honey, I love it when you make that turkey. It's the best turkey ever.
Why, I'm happy to. It's an honor, a privilege. I'd do it again in a heartbeat if I could.
What do you mean if you could?
I mean, I've eaten the turkey. It's gone. I made it.
Well, I thought that's what the whole thing about having a family get together was to have the turkey. You ate it already, or?
I'm not going to lie to you. Would you like me to spread a disinformation campaign and, talk to your friends and get them to lie on your behalf? A series of half-truths told infinitely in an echo chamber?
Look, everything, we've always based our relationship on honesty.
And I'm being honest with you right now. I ate that whole turkey after cooking it and didn't give you any.
Okay.
Freeze. Let's see what happens 4 or 5 hours later after Thanksgiving has turned to Thanksgiving evening. How has this conversation changed?
Oh. Man, don't think
If
can
I have
do
to
this
hold
second.
your hair back one more time, I can't do it, darling. I can't.
Zelda, F. Scott, I just want to thank you for having me over. This has been the best meal I've ever had. It's fantastic.
You didn't get any of the turkey, did you?
I didn't really want the turkey anyway, but the fact that you have this copious amounts of booze that you didn't drink, is just wonderful.
And,
Zelda likes her gin.
and I'm a dolphin from Italy. Oh, hey, Duck. Oh my God, it's been such a long year, hasn't it already? And it's only March. April now.
It is so long. Like I can't believe, I don't know how we're gonna get through another 8 months of this.
I know. I just want to say how glad I am that you and I are friends and that we agree on everything. It just makes it easier, you know?
I knew I had found a kindred spirit when we both understood that Britney Spears was a time traveling witch.
I know, because so many people, I say this and then they say, what? And it's like, no, it's true. I saw it on the internet.
When she said, oops, I did it again, that was code for something.
Exactly. Oh, 2 O's back to back. Come on. We're talking recession, huh?
Yeah.
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 Oh,
Like when all her hair fell out, people thought she shaved her head. Like, no, that's easily a sign of time travel.
come on. I mean,
Hair doesn't go with you.
yeah. And she had to use a razor, R-A-Z-O-R, the Z's in the middle between the. Yeah.
I got you. I understand where you're coming from on that one.
I know. Well, you know, people think, oh, how cute a meme. How many pictures were there? 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4 seasons. We're talking about do you see what I see?
I do.
It looks like
I think it's Britney Spears. She's chopping up onions. She's chopping them real hard.
yeah, for fake tears, fake news, fake tears. It all is so obvious.
Yep. That's how she got us to. She tried to convince the world that Kevin Federline was a real human being. But I'm not falling for that, and I'm not falling for whatever she's about to say right now.
Okay. Starts with an O, finishes with a Y. Unless you take it down as an acronym. Okay, 2 letters. That's it. It's so obvious. Go on.
That's right. I'm a fraud. This whole thing has been an illusion.
I knew it. Brittany, why are you here?
I just wanted to come clean, guys. Like, I understand that I may have ruined your lives. You've had so much faith in me. I just wanted to come back and say, I too have faith in you, and I didn't mean for you to buy all my shenanigans. I mean, that was a wig. It was a bald cap. I didn't shave my head.
Duck, isn't this amazing how she's just confirming what we know by denying it?
Absolutely. But Brittany, I want you to know that this hasn't been a thing that ruined our lives. This is a thing that brought me and Jim together.
It gave us meaning, Brittany.
It gives us purpose. Exposing your falsehoods brings us joy.
Seriously?
Absolutely.
Who
So,
would
like-
lie about something like this? It's so obvious.
And it doesn't even matter, does it? Like, you're just gonna not believe me anyway.
Right. And it's not like anybody's gotten hurt, really, right? You just
Well, I
make really interesting music. That's all.
I can't have kids. I can't have any more children, but it doesn't matter, right? Because you guys are still friends.
We are still friends.
Yeah, I mean, some of the people that I know, they listen to Kylie Minogue. Give me a break.
Oh my God, she's old, am I right?
Whoa.
Well, anyway, Brittany, you keep doing what you're doing, and we'll keep conspiring like we're conspiring.
And by the way, Kevin Federline, you're better off without him.
Oh, that's fantastic! A big round of applause wherever you are. Why is Brandon holding up a snake?
Because it's good for you.
Okay, that's
Drink some
good.
snake
That's good.
oil.
That's fun. I'm sorry. That's good. This is delightful. Snake oil. This has been a fantastic show. Thank you all so much for watching. I want to do a big thank you one more time to everybody right now who's watching us live on the live stream. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to our wonderful supporters, Mint Post and Finnegan's Beer. Don't forget, you can go and get a Finnegan's Beer. Get 10% off a growler if you go to the Finnegan's curbside pickup, and to the Bryant Lake Bowl, which I am able to be here in, and you should absolutely support them. They are doing a lot to try and keep their employees supported during this really challenging time. So make a donation, buy some of their fabulous merch, and make sure that they are still here when we get through this whole thing. And if you have anything left after that, support us, because we need some support too, because we're still paying all our cast and trying to make this whole thing work. And so if you can make a gift on our GiveMN page or become a Patreon, it means a lot and helps us a whole lot right now. So until then, I am so thankful for everybody who watched, for these amazing guests. This has been our show for tonight. I'll just say each of our guests and our cast, if you all want to say your names and say who you were tonight. Yes, Catherine, do you want to start? Catherine?
I'll go first. Thank you for having me, Catharine Richert with NPR.
Maggie Koerth, I'm with 538, and this is delightful. Thank you.
Duck Washington.
Brandon Boat.
Aaron Roberts.
I might be Jim Robinson.
And then Dennis Curley is down there on the piano. Thank you all so much for watching. Dennis Curley, will you play us out?
We can never know about the facts on the ground.
It's fun.
Thank you, Carly.
Party.
So we Google news every day, and we wonder just how much we can trust what we need, and what we read as our skill for discernment goes to waste in a way.
Wear your face masks
Disinformation. Come on, everybody.
in public.
Disinformation is making me hate, but they keep perpetrating. Everybody's using their own set of facts now. Come on, baby, spread disinformation, chaos and confusion, fan out to the max now. Come on, baby, spread disinformation. InfoWars and Breitbart are making a splash. Wonder how much garbage they will see just for cash. Well, come on, spread disinformation with me. But not really, and we'll see you all next week. Goodbye.
Yay! That's fantastic. I'm sorry.